You know, one of the first things that it says in the Bible that they did as a couple, it said that he had this palace, and he saw this vineyard right next to the palace, and he said, I like that. I want that vineyard. That's great. He went to the guy who owned the vineyard, and he said, sell me your vineyard. The guy said, it's not for sale. And he goes, no, name your price. Send me, yeah. So he went home and was all mopey. And Jezebel said, oh, poor little Ahab, what's wrong, honey? You know, she's rubbing his toes, and they're just hanging out and enjoying a tender moment. And he says, he won't sell me his vineyard. She kills him. She has him killed and gives the vineyard to her husband. That actually does play into where we're going in all of this, by the way. I'm pretty sure his name was Nabal, and that does pop up in this story later. Anyway, he did all these awful things. He set up these shrines to these fertility goddess, Asherah. It was supposed to give them fertility, good harvest, children. Then they would have a child, and then they would go and sacrifice the first one to Baal. It's just about as evil of a system as it can possibly be. And I don't want to get all preachy on you, but let me just put a thought out here. In Western culture right now, we worship pornography, we worship OnlyFans, we worship just, you can't drive down the street without seeing a billboard with a scantily clad woman on it or a man. Everything is pushing that all day long in your face. And then we have abortion. And sex in and of itself is healthy, has a purpose, and it should be enjoyable for that purpose. But we have this system, and they had this system. You get fertility, you then sacrifice the very beginning of that fertility. Satan has not lost track of where he's at. He knows that someday God is going to crush his head. And that seed that came through the woman was Mary. The seed, the one who was born that crushed his head, was Jesus. I'm skipping way ahead in the story, but Satan was always looking out for it because he didn't know. The Bible didn't expressly say there is going to be a Messiah who's going to do this, this, and this. If Satan had known that killing Jesus would have given him an entire world full of followers and believers, after Jesus was the perfect price for sin, and then because of that Christ that was in him suddenly going out into the whole world and being available to any of us, you know, Satan just opened up a whole can of whoop-ass that he could not have possibly been thinking about. Elijah goes to, he's a prophet, he goes to Ahab. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. And the word of the Lord came to him, depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself in the brook. Okay. Because of the evil that Ahab had unleashed in Israel, because of all these demonic gods that he was promoting and worshiping, God said, I am going to shut up the heavens and there's going to be a famine on the land. You're not going to do all of this and still receive the plenty, still receive rain, still receive everything that you need for an abundant crop. What was Asherah? Asherah was a fertility goddess, a fertility in harvest as well.
They still have them.
Oh, yeah.
There's some called Asherah.
Yep, they still have them. So Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh, went to the king and said, because of your evil, it isn't going to rain for 3.5 years. There's going to be a famine, right? Then he told Elijah, go and hide yourself. Elijah did. Now skip down to verse 8. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 8. And I'm only right now where I expected to be 45 minutes ago. Please turn off your cell phones or turn the sound off, please. Then the word of the Lord came to him, Elijah, the prophet. Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon. Where does it belong to?
Sidon.
Sidon. What is Sidon? Sidon is a pagan city.
Is that in Lebanon?
Sidon is in Lebanon now, yeah.
They used to say Sidon was in Tyre.
Tyre and Sidon are twin cities.
Yeah.
Tyre is just a little bit south of Sidon. He says, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So the famine is still going on, right? But he tells the prophet, go there. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, bring me a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. Verse 11. And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. You ever do that to somebody, by the way? I used to do that to my daughter all the time when she was a teenager. I would say, hey, could you do such and such? And she would say, sure. And then when she would get to the edge of the doorway, like just in the next room, I'd say, oh yeah, and I'd wait. And she would come back in, and I'd say, oh, never mind. No, could you get me that? Okay. And then as soon as she got just outside the doorway, I go, hey, by the way, it would take her about 3 or 4 times to get mad at me. But I don't think he was doing that. I just think it's funny.
I think I've been a participator on the other end of that.
Yeah, my dad used to do that to me too. So all of the horrible things that my dad did to me, I made my kids do, except that because of TV remote controls, I was the one who had to get up and change the TV channel. You know, he always says, you have young legs. You're the remote control. My kids didn't have to do that. That's how easy they've had it. Okay, so he says, give me a drink. She says she just gets up to go do it. He called her. Now, he was respected. People knew who he was. But he's in a pagan city that is not part of Israel. And he's still asking someone, and out of respect for him and who he is, the woman just got up and did it. You know, when you were a prophet whether you were in your hometown or not. As she was going to bring it, he called her and says, bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. And she said to him, as the Lord your God lives. She doesn't say my God. And when she says Lord, by the way, that word is Yahweh. If you look it up, if you look in the Strong's Concordance and look up that word in the verse, it'll say it's Yahweh or Jehovah, which is just a different way of saying the exact same word. As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. And now I'm gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in, prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. There's a famine in the land. There's no food being produced. There's no more flour. All she had was a little bit, just enough that she was going to make one last supper for her and her kid. She's a widow. She doesn't have anybody else to provide for her. She was going to make it, they were going to eat it, and then they were going to die of starvation. And Elijah said to her, do not fear. Go, do as I have said. But first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterwards, make something for yourself and your son. In other words, give to Yahweh first. That's what he's telling her. Give to Yahweh first. Yahweh's not even her God. But he's saying, just out of respect, just trust me on this one. Don't be afraid. Go ahead and do it. What has she got to lose? She's going to die anyway. I mean, what if she died 12 hours earlier? For thus says the Lord, thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day the Lord sends rain upon the earth. So he's talking to her about a God that's not her God. He's from a foreign country. But he's saying, do this. Right? You know what she could have just as easily told him? Pound sand. Or in the King James, poundeth sandeth. I don't know what the equivalent would have been back then, but they had a lot of sand to pound. So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Every time she reached into that jar, there was more flour. And she fed him, and she fed herself, and she fed her son. Every time she needed oil, there was more oil that she could just pour out of that jar and use.
Jumping Japanese Jesus.